text message appeared on Nora Chen's phone at 2:47 a.m., jolting her awake from restless sleep. Stay away from Stephen. This is your final warning. You don't want to see what happens next. Andrea. Nora's hands trembled as she read the words again. This was the fourth threat this week, each one more menacing than the last. She set the phone face down on her nightstand, but sleep wouldn't return. Outside her small Seattle apartment, rain tapped against the windows like impatient fingers. 6 months after her divorce, Nora thought the worst was behind her. Stephen had moved out, moved on with Andrea, and supposedly moved forward with his life. But lately, something had shifted. The harassment from both of them had intensified, creating a nightmare she couldn't escape. What she didn't know was that the man texting her, calling her, showing up at her workplace, wasn't Stephen anymore. Nora dragged herself to work the next morning, exhaustion weighing heavy on her shoulders. The marketing agency's open office buzzed with typical Monday morning energy. But she felt disconnected from it all. Dark circles under her eyes told the story of too many sleepless nights. "You look terrible," her colleague Jennifer said, not unkindly. "Everything okay?" Nora forced a smile. "Just tired. Stephen and his girlfriend are..." She paused, searching for the right words. "They're making things difficult." It was an understatement. The divorce had been finalized months ago, but Stephen seemed incapable of letting go. What made it worse was Andrea, his new girlfriend, who had somehow made it her personal mission to drive Nora away from any contact with Stephen, even though Nora wanted nothing more than to be left alone. The irony wasn't lost on her. Andrea demanded she stay away from Stephen, while Stephen himself continued to pursue contact. Phone calls at odd hours, surprise visits to her apartment building, showing up at places he knew she frequented. It was like being caught in the middle of someone else's psychological warfare. Her phone buzzed, another text from Stephen. "We need to talk. Meet me for lunch today. It's important." Then, almost immediately, her phone rang. Andrea's shrill voice filled the line before Nora could even say hello. "I saw Stephen texted you," Andrea snapped. "Whatever he wants, say no." "I'm serious, Nora. Stay away from him." "I didn't even respond." "Good. Keep it that way. Some of us have moved on with our lives. You should try it." The line went dead. Nora stared at her phone, feeling that familiar knot of anxiety tighten in her chest. She was being pulled in opposite directions by two people who seemed determined to make her life miserable. But she had to work, had to function, had to pretend her world wasn't slowly unraveling. Stephen appeared at her office building that afternoon, waiting by the main entrance like he had every right to be there. Nora's heart sank when she saw him through the glass doors. There was no avoiding him now. "We need to talk," he said as she reluctantly approached. "Stephen, Andrea just called me this morning, telling me to stay away from you. I'm trying to respect that. And honestly, I want the same thing. Can't we just leave each other alone?" Stephen's face darkened. "Andrea doesn't control my life? Or yours? I'm not trying to cause problems between you two. Meet me for coffee tomorrow. 1 hour, that's all I'm asking." There was something different about him, something that made Nora's skin crawl. His eyes seemed darker somehow, more intense. When he spoke, she caught glimpses of something that didn't quite fit, like an actor who hadn't fully memorized their lines. "I don't think that's a good idea." Stephen stepped closer, and Nora instinctively took a step back. "I'm not asking, Nora. I'm telling you. Tomorrow at 3 p.m., that coffee shop on Pine Street where we used to go." The commanding tone, the way he invaded her personal space, this wasn't like Stephen at all. During their marriage, he'd been passive-aggressive, manipulative in subtle ways. This direct intimidation was new. "Fine," she said quietly. "One coffee, then we're done." Stephen smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Good girl." As he walked away, Nora felt a chill that had nothing to do with Seattle's perpetual drizzle. Something was very wrong here, but she couldn't put her finger on what. The coffee shop was nearly empty when Nora arrived the next afternoon. Stephen was already there, sitting at a corner table with his back to the wall. He waved her over with an enthusiasm that felt forced. "You look good," he said as she sat down. "Really good." "Thanks. What did you want to talk about?" "Us. What we had. What we could have again." Nora blinked. "Stephen, you're with Andrea. You left me for her, remember?" "That was a mistake." His hand moved across the table toward hers. "I've been thinking about our time together. The good times." She pulled her hands away. There weren't many good times toward the end. "That's why we got divorced. But there were some." His voice dropped lower, taking on an almost hypnotic quality. "Remember our honeymoon in Vancouver? How we stayed in bed all morning just talking and—" "Stephen, stop. I could make you feel like that again. Better than that. I've learned things, Nora. I know things now that could change everything for us. This was beyond inappropriate. This was insane. You need to stop. I don't know what game you're playing with Andrea, but I don't want any part of it." Stephen's expression shifted. The mask of charm slipped, revealing something underneath that made Nora's blood run cold. His eyes seemed to reflect light strangely, almost like an animal's eyes caught in headlights. "You think you can just dismiss me?" His voice was still Stephen's, but there was something else layered beneath it. "You think you can just walk away?" "Yes, actually, I do." Nora stood up. "I'm leaving." Stephen's hand shot out faster than should have been possible, gripping her wrist with surprising strength. "Sit down." The command carried weight that seemed to press against her mind. For a moment, Nora felt compelled to obey. But fear overrode everything else, and she yanked her arm free. "Don't touch me." She hurried toward the exit, but Stephen's voice followed her. "You can't run from this forever, Nora. I know where you live. I know where you work. I know everything about you." Outside, Nora's hands shook as she fumbled for her car keys. That wasn't Stephen in there. It looked like him, sounded like him, but something else was wearing his face. The next day brought Seattle's typical autumn weather, heavy clouds and steady rain that turned the city gray and mournful. Nora sat in the small employee break area outside her office building, picking at a salad she had no appetite for. "Mind if I sit?" She looked up to see a man in his early 40s, Asian features, wearing a baseball cap and a kind smile. She didn't recognize him, but the building housed several different companies. "Sure." She gestured to the empty chair across from her. "James Park," he said, settling into the chair. "Just started working here yesterday. Marketing consultant." "Nora Chen, I'm with Meridian Marketing on the 5th floor." "Ah, the good guys. I'm working with the tech firm on 7. James pulled out a simple sandwich from a brown bag. "Terrible weather for eating outside, but I needed some air. Office buildings can feel like prisons sometimes." Nora found herself relaxing slightly. There was something calming about James, an aura of quiet confidence that seemed to push back against her constant anxiety. "You look like someone carrying the weight of the world," James observed gently. "I don't mean to pry, but sometimes it helps to talk to a stranger." Maybe it was the exhaustion, or maybe it was the genuine concern in his voice, but Nora found herself opening up. "My ex-husband," she said quietly. "He's been different lately, more aggressive." and his girlfriend keeps threatening me to stay away from him. But then he keeps pursuing me. I feel trapped in the middle of their dysfunction." James nodded thoughtfully. "Divorce can bring out the worst in people. But you said he's been different. Different how? Stronger. More commanding. There are moments when he doesn't seem like himself at all. Like something else is looking out through his eyes." She immediately regretted sharing that detail. It sounded crazy. But James didn't look at her like she was crazy. Instead, his expression grew serious. "Tell me," he said carefully. "Has he been interested in things he never cared about before? Old books, symbols, places of power?" Nora frowned. "Actually, yes. He mentioned learning things, new things, and yesterday he said something about making me feel better than I ever had before, like he had some kind of special knowledge." James was quiet for a long moment, studying her face. Then he reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a small, smooth stone, perfectly round, dark blue with flecks that caught the light. "This might sound strange," he said, "but I think you need protection. Not from your ex-husband, but from whatever's influencing him." "I don't understand." "Sometimes people become vehicles for things that shouldn't exist in our world. These entities feed on conflict, on pain, on the kind of emotional turmoil you're experiencing. They find someone vulnerable, someone angry or desperate, and they make them stronger, more persuasive, more dangerous." Nora stared at him. "Are you saying my ex-husband is possessed?" "I'm saying something is using him to get to you. And tomorrow, at sunrise, I want you to go to Alki Beach. Find a stone like this one, smooth, round, something that speaks to you. Hold it while the sun comes up and believe, really believe, that you have the power to protect yourself. Then keep it with you." That sounds crazy. "I know. But what do you have to lose? If I'm wrong, you've wasted an hour and found a pretty rock. If I'm right?" James stood up, putting the stone back in his pocket. "If I'm right, it might save your life." He walked away without another word, leaving Nora alone in the rain with more questions than answers. At 5:30 a.m. the next morning, Nora stood on Alki Beach watching the horizon, lighten from black to deep purple. The Puget Sound was calm, lapping gently at the rocky shore. She felt ridiculous, but she was there. She walked along the water's edge looking for... what? A magic stone? She almost turned around 3 times, but something kept her moving forward. Maybe it was desperation. Maybe it was hope. Then she saw it. Half buried in the wet sand was a stone about the size of a silver dollar, perfectly smooth and deep green with veins of gold running through it. When she picked it up, it was warm despite the cool morning air. Nora sat down on a piece of driftwood, holding the stone in both hands as the sun crested the horizon. The first rays of light hit the water, turning it into liquid metal. "Believe," James had said. "Believe you have the power to protect yourself." She closed her eyes and tried to push away her skepticism. What if there were things in the world that couldn't be explained by logic? What if Stephen really was being influenced by something dark? The stone seemed to pulse with warmth in her hands. "I have the power to protect myself," she whispered to the dawn. "I am stronger than whatever is trying to hurt me." The words felt silly at first, then gradually more natural. By the time the sun was fully visible above the horizon, Nora felt something shift inside her. A sense of inner strength she hadn't felt in months. She slipped the stone into her pocket and headed home to get ready for work. That afternoon, Stephen was waiting in her office building's lobby. "We're not done talking," he announced as she tried to walk past him. "Yes, we are." Nora's hand found the stone in her pocket. "I'm not playing this game anymore, Stephen. Game? His laugh was harsh, unfamiliar. This isn't a game, little girl. This is about power, about control, about taking what's mine. The words sent ice through her veins, but Nora forced herself to stand straighter. I'm not yours. I haven't been yours for months. Stephen grabbed her arm, his grip painfully tight. You'll always be mine. In ways you can't even imagine. That's when she saw it. The thing that had been nagging at her for days finally became clear. Stephen's reflection in the lobby's mirrored wall didn't match his physical presence. While his body faced her, his reflection seemed to be looking in a different direction entirely, as if two separate entities occupied the same space. You're not Stephen, she said quietly. The thing wearing Stephen's face smiled, and for just a moment its features shifted. The eyes became solid black, the smile too wide, showing teeth that were too sharp. Clever girl. But it doesn't matter what you know. Stephen invited me in willingly. He wanted power over you so badly, he made a deal. And now, it leaned closer, its voice dropping to a whisper. Now I'm going to use his face to destroy you piece by piece. Nora's grip tightened on the stone. Without fully understanding why, she pulled it from her pocket and held it up between them. Get away from me. The entity hissed and stepped back. Where the stone caught the light, Stephen's features flickered and wavered like a bad television signal. Interesting, it said. Someone's been helping you. But parlor tricks won't save you for long. Maybe not, Nora said, surprised by her own calm. But they'll save me right now. She walked toward the exit, the stone held out in front of her. The entity didn't follow. That evening, Nora found James waiting by her car in the building's parking garage. It worked, she said without preamble. I hoped it would. How bad was it? Bad. You were right. Something is using Stephen's body. It admitted it. Said Stephen made some kind of deal for power over me. James nodded grimly. The desperate ones always make deals. They think they're gaining control, but they're really just becoming puppets. What happens now? How do I stop this permanently? You don't stop it, James said. You make it choose to leave. He reached into his jacket and pulled out a larger stone, this one black with silver veins that seemed to move in the light. Tomorrow night at midnight it will come for you, probably at your apartment. It knows the small stone can hold it back, but it thinks it can overwhelm you with persistence. And you're going to let it in. Nora stared at him. That sounds like the worst possible plan. Trust me, and when it enters your space, hold both stones and speak directly to Stephen. Not the entity, but the man underneath. Tell him he still has a choice, that he can choose to let go of his need to control you. The entity feeds on that obsession, that desperate hunger for power over another person, if Stephen can truly release that desire. The entity loses its hold, Nora finished. Exactly. But here's the crucial part. You have to mean it. You have to genuinely forgive him and let go of your own anger. If there's any part of you that wants revenge, that wants to see him suffer, the entity will use that against you. James handed her the black stone. It was heavier than expected and seemed to vibrate with suppressed energy. What if it doesn't work? What if Stephen can't let go? James was quiet for a long moment. Then you use both stones together and command it to leave in God's name. Whatever happens after that, happens. And if none of this works, then call the police and tell them your ex-husband is having a psychotic break. Sometimes the mundane world has to handle what the spiritual world can't. He started to walk away, then turned back. Nora, you're stronger than you know. Don't let anyone, human or otherwise, convince you different. At 11:47 p.m., Nora sat in her living room with both stones in her hands, trying to calm her racing heart. She'd left her front door unlocked, something that went against every instinct she had. The knock came at exactly midnight. "I know you're in there, Nora." Stephen's voice, but with that underlying wrongness that made her skin crawl. "Open the door." She stood up slowly. "It's unlocked." The door opened and Stephen stepped inside. But his movements were wrong, too fluid, like he was floating rather than walking. His eyes reflected the lamplight with an unnatural gleam. "Clever girl, leaving it open? But you can't hide behind stones and tricks forever." "I'm not hiding." Nora held up both stones, feeling their warmth pulse through her palms. "Stephen, I know you're in there somewhere. I know you can hear me." The entity laughed with Stephen's mouth. "He can hear you." He's screaming, actually. Screaming about how you ruined his life, how you deserved everything bad that happened between you. "That's not Stephen talking? That's you, huh? We are one now." His rage, my power. His obsession, my purpose. Nora forced herself to take a step closer. "Stephen, look at me. Really look at me. When we got married, you promised to love and protect me. Remember that man? Remember who you were before the anger took over?" For just a moment, Stephen's features softened. "Nora?" His voice sounded confused, younger somehow. "What's happening to me?" The entity reasserted control quickly, Stephen's face twisting into a snarl. "Weak. Pathetic. She doesn't want your love, Stephen. She wants to control you, just like she always did." "That's not true," Nora said firmly, speaking directly to the frightened man she could sense underneath the entity's control. "Stephen, I never wanted to control you. I wanted us to be partners. I wanted us to be happy, but we weren't, and that's okay. People grow apart. It doesn't make either of us bad people." "Lies." The entity's voice overpowered Stephen's completely now. "She left you. She abandoned you when things got difficult." But Nora kept speaking to Stephen, ignoring the entity's increasingly frantic interruptions. "I forgive you, Stephen, for the fights, for the cruel things we said to each other, for the way our marriage ended. I forgive all of it. And I hope you can forgive me too." The stones in her hands grew almost hot as the entity seemed to writhe inside Stephen's body. "You can let go now," Nora continued. "You don't have to carry this anger anymore. You don't have to try to control me or hurt me or possess me. I release you from all of that, and I hope you can release me too." Stephen's body convulsed, and for a moment she saw him clearly. Not the entity, but the man she'd once loved. Tears streamed down his face. "I'm sorry," he whispered. "I'm so sorry, Nora. I couldn't stand losing you. I couldn't stand not having power over anything in my life." "I know. But power over other people isn't real power. Real power is choosing who you want to be every single day." The entity made one last desperate attempt to maintain control, Stephen's body lurching forward with unnatural speed. But Nora held up both stones and spoke with absolute conviction. "You have no power here. Stephen chooses to let go. I choose to let go. In God's name, I command you to leave this place and never return." Light seemed to pour from the stones, filling the room with warmth and brightness. The entity shrieked, a sound that came from Stephen's throat, but belonged to something infinitely older and more malevolent. Then Stephen collapsed. When Stephen woke up on Nora's couch an hour later, he looked like himself for the first time in weeks. Confused, exhausted, but genuinely human. What happened? He asked, struggling to sit up. You made a deal with something you shouldn't have, Nora said simply. But you chose to break it. Stephen put his head in his hands. I remember pieces. Feeling so angry all the time, like I was drowning in it. And then something offered to make me stronger, to give me control over my life again. And you said yes. I said yes. He looked up at her with haunted eyes. Nora, the things I said to you, the things I did, are over now. But Stephen, you need help. Real help. Not from entities or quick fixes, but from a therapist who can help you understand why you felt like you needed to control me in the first place. He nodded slowly. I called Andrea before I came here tonight. Broke up with her. Why? Because I realized I was using her the same way I tried to use you, as a way to feel powerful, to feel in control of something. That's not love. That's not even close to love. They sat in comfortable silence for a while. Finally, Stephen stood up. I should go. But Nora, thank you for not giving up on the part of me that was still human. After he left, Nora sat on her couch holding both stones, feeling lighter than she had in months. The entity was gone. Stephen was free to make better choices. And she was finally free too. The next morning, Nora decided to thank James for his help. She stopped by the 7th floor to find him, but the receptionist at the tech firm looked at her blankly. James Park? No, we don't have anyone by that name working here. Never have. Confused, Nora went to building security and asked to see the camera footage from the employee break area 2 days ago when she'd first met James. The security guard was happy to help. They scrolled through the footage until they found the right timestamp. There was Nora sitting alone at the table, eating her salad. She was talking animatedly to someone, gesturing, nodding, even laughing at one point. But there was no one else in the frame. For 37 minutes, the camera showed Nora having an intense conversation with empty air. Nora stared at the screen, her mind reeling. Can you play that again? They watched it twice more. Each time, the result was the same. Nora talking to no one, picking up and examining something invisible in her hands, nodding seriously at advice that came from nowhere. Ma'am, are you all right? The security guard asked gently. Nora touched the stones in her pocket. Stones that were definitely real, that had definitely helped her face down an entity of pure malevolence. I'm fine, she said. Thank you for showing me this. She walked home in a daze, trying to process what she'd learned. James had never existed. The guardian who'd saved her life, who'd given her the tools and wisdom to free both herself and Stephen from supernatural torment, had been a figment of her imagination, or had he? That evening, alone in her apartment, Nora held the green stone up to the light. It was real. Its warmth was real. The power it had given her to face down a demon was real. Maybe James had been her subconscious mind, finding a way to access knowledge and strength she didn't know she possessed. Maybe in her darkest moments, some part of her had created exactly the mentor she needed to survive, or maybe guardians came in whatever form people needed them to take, even if that form existed only in the space between hope and faith. Nora smiled and put the stone back in her pocket. It didn't matter whether James had been real or imagined. What mattered was that when she needed protection most, protection had come. And the source of that protection, divine, psychological, or somewhere in between, was less important than the truth she'd learned. The strongest guardian anyone could have was their own choice to believe in their power to overcome darkness. The stones were just a way to remember that truth when everything else seemed lost. Outside her window, Seattle's eternal rain began to fall again. But this time, it sounded like music. Nora kept both stones on her desk at work, not as protection from supernatural threats, but as reminders of her own strength. She'd started therapy to work through the trauma of her marriage and the supernatural encounter that had finally ended it. Stephen was in therapy too, she'd heard through mutual friends. He was doing better, staying single, and focusing on understanding why he'd been so desperate for control that he'd literally made a deal with a demon. Andrea had tried to contact Nora once after Stephen broke up with her, demanding to know what kind of witchcraft Nora had used to steal him back. Nora had blocked her number without responding. Some people weren't ready to face the truth about their own destructive patterns. Sometimes, on rainy days, Nora thought she caught glimpses of a figure in a baseball cap watching her from across the street or sitting at nearby cafe tables. But when she looked directly, no one was there. She didn't mind. Whether James was real, imagined, or something in between, he'd taught her the most important lesson of her life. The guardian you need most is often the one you find within yourself. And that guardian never leaves you, as long as you remember to believe in its power.